Da 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 da. Welcome to disenFRIENDSchised. I'm Karen Bulinski Mathison of The Naked Grief, identifying disenfranchised grief one episode at a time through the lens of friends. We are on season 1, episode 4, the one with George Stephanopoulos. And here's the thing, George Stephanopoulos never actually appears in this episode, but the episode is named after him anyway, because sometimes the fantasy, the escape, the distraction becomes more real than the actual crisis happening right in front of us. This episode is about 4 kinds of grief happening simultaneously and how support systems can break down when people get tired of being supportive. So let's start with Ross. The episode opens at Central Perk. Phoebe's asleep on the couch. She's exhausted because her grandmother and her grandmother's new boyfriend have been keeping her up all night. And I mean, kept her up. They were loud, really loud. Monica offers to let Phoebe sleep over, and Phoebe accepts. This is a small moment, but it's important because Monica sees someone's in pain and offers support. She doesn't ask a lot of questions. She just says, "Come stay with me. We'll make it a girls' night." Then Chandler and Joey show up with hockey tickets. They're trying to cheer Ross up, and they say it's a birthday present. And Ross immediately calls them out on this because his birthday was 7 months ago. He realizes they have 3 tickets, and that means that Joey and Chandler couldn't decide which one of them got to bring a date, so they're using him as the third wheel. But then Ross looks at the date on the tickets, and his face changes. October 20th, the anniversary of when he and Carol first slept together. And suddenly the hockey game isn't about fun anymore. It's a reminder, a trigger, a day he didn't ask to remember. Ross tells the guys that he's not going. He's going to go home and think about his ex-wife and her lesbian lover, and he's going to sit with his grief. But Joey convinces him. Joey says, "We'll buy you a big foam finger." And Ross goes, and this is where support fatigue starts. Because here's what happens. Ross goes to the game, and the entire time he's noticing things along the way that reminds him of Carol. And he's pointing them all out. He's talking about them. He's reliving the anniversary over and over again, which is how the grief brain works. But what we see in this episode is also how the support system functions. Joey and Chandler start by trying to be supportive. They really are. But you can see gradually every time Ross brings up another memory, they're getting more and more annoyed. It's layering on them and weighing heavy. They're tired of hearing about Carol. They want Ross to just be at the game. They want him to move on. And then the game starts, and for a moment, Ross forgets about Carol, and he gets into it. He's rooting for the Rangers. He's having fun. The support is working. And then a hockey puck smacks him dead in the face. And he ends up in the emergency room. And while they're waiting, Ross starts revealing things. Carol was his first, his only. And he's only ever been with one woman. So this day is weighing a lot heavier because of the magnitude of what this day represents. And when Chandler and Joey hear this, the reaction is kind of telling. Chandler says it's sweet and romantic, but then he admits that he thinks Ross is kind of a freak for only having been with the one person and not rebounding faster and things like that. And that's the moment the support starts to turn into judgment. That's when the support system starts to break down. Ross wanted to be held through his grief. Instead, he's being pathologized for it. And here's the disenfranchised grief that nobody talks about. The grief of losing your support system while you're grieving. The grief of being too much, too sad, too stuck for the people who said they'd be there, which is why Ross originally declined the invitation. He knew that he was going to be in his own head potentially, and he didn't want to be a burden on anybody. And then we have Rachel with identity loss. Meanwhile, Rachel gets her first paycheck. And she's excited. She earned it. She's wiped tables. She steamed milk. She did the work. And she's looking at the little name in the envelope, all excited. And when she opens it up, she sees that taxes have taken almost everything. And she asks, "Who's FICA? Why is he getting all my money? Her friends try and cheer her up, and they tell her it's good earnings for a first job. They'll tip her generously. They're trying to soften the blow. But when Rachel's old friends from Long Island show up, Rachel starts to really look at where her life is now and what it could have been. One of her friends is heavily pregnant. One is thin and glamorous and engaged, and she's got a huge ring. Another one is being made a partner in her father's firm, and they're all screaming and hugging and jumping up and down and celebrating their wins. And Rachel is watching all of this happen in real time, and she's realizing while they're all moving forward, she's right back at the beginning. They're all getting what they were supposed to get, and she's working as a waitress. She left Barry at the altar, and everyone back home still talks about it. And when her friends ask when she's coming back, Rachel laughs and says she's staying in the city for good. But her friends clearly don't believe her. They think she is going to come crawling back to being an effortless rich girl on Long Island. And this is also disenfranchised grief. Nobody's died, nobody's sick, but Rachel is grieving the loss of her own identity. She's grieving the person she was supposed to be, the engaged girl with the rich fiance, the girl who had a plan. She's grieving the future she left behind when she ran away from Barry. And the grief is compounded by the fact that her old friends are living that future. They're living the life Rachel was supposed to have. So when Rachel comes back to the apartment and gets a call from her credit card company saying that she hasn't used her card in weeks, she starts to spiral. She rants about how low her income is. She rants about about all of her Long Island friends' successes. And she feels like her life is falling apart. And Monica and Phoebe try to cheer her up, but Rachel's grief is contagious, and she ends up depressing them too. Monica starts eating cookie dough, Phoebe drinks tiki death punch straight from the blender, and Rachel apologizes for bringing them down. This is another kind of support fatigue. The fatigue of being around someone else's grief when you don't have the resources to hold it. And again, it's girls' night at Monica's apartment, so they order pizza. And they use the pizza as kind of an escape. It's the wrong pizza. It was meant for George Stephanopoulos, President Clinton's gorgeous press secretary, who apparently lives right across the street, or is at least staying there. And Monica leaps up, and the girls all start swooning, and they forget about Rachel's spiral. They forget about their own exhaustion, and they have a new focus, George. They take the pizza to the balcony with binoculars, and they're spying on George and his date. The lights go out, and they assume he's having an intimate moment. And the girls get drunk and excited and distracted and start kind of fantasizing about what that could be like. This is escapism. This is what happens when the grief gets too heavy. We find something else to focus on, something lighter, something that doesn't require us to hold anyone else's pain. George Stephanopoulos becomes the container for all their displaced energy. He's the fantasy. He's the distraction from Rachel's identity loss, from Phoebe's exhaustion, and from Monica's compassion fatigue. And it does work for a moment. But then the girls get drunk and the resentments start to come out. Monica reveals that the vegetable pate that she once made for Phoebe, who's a vegetarian, was actually made from goose. And Phoebe's disgusted. And then Phoebe fires back. She tells Monica she doesn't feel bad about sleeping with a guy a couple hours after he and Monica had broken up. And this is betrayal. It's a violation of trust. And it's been sitting there unspoken until the alcohol loosened Phoebe's tongue. Then Rachel takes it further. She reveals that a Valentine that she had given Monica years before that she said was from a boy was actually from her. And then she explains to Phoebe that Monica was overweight and didn't get a lot of Valentines. So she did it to make Monica feel better. And Monica retaliates by telling telling Phoebe that Rachel peed her pants in 7th grade while laughing. And Rachel defends herself and says, well, you made me laugh so hard. Anyhow, this is what happens when support systems break down, when the resentments come out, the old hurts, the things that people have been holding on to, waiting for the right moment to weaponize them, or hoping they'll just forget about them. And it's all happening while they're supposed to be supporting each other through Rachel's crisis and Phoebe's exhaustion from what's going on in her grandmother's apartment. So the girls are squabbling, they're hurting each other, and they're using their intimacy as ammunition. But then Phoebe spots George through the binoculars, and the girls beg him to drop his towel, and he does, and they're happy again. And the crisis is averted, the resentments are buried, and the escape continues. So here's what this episode is really about. Support systems have capacity limits, and when people are grieving, whether it's a death, a loss of identity, exhaustion, or betrayal, they can only hold so much before they break. Ross is grieving the anniversary of Carol. He needs support, but Chandler and Joey get tired of hearing about it. They want him to move on. They want him to be fun again. And when he can't, they start judging him for it. So I want to just pause here for a moment and have you all listeners out there reflect on this. Have you ever been in a situation where you were hurting and the people that you wanted to lean on the most started to feel or show signs that they were getting a little tired of having to show up in the same way for you repeatedly? When that happens, how do you change? Do you stop leaning on them? Do you stop telling them what you need? Does your relationship end up pivoting a little bit because you don't want to feel like a burden? Society sets standards for how we're supposed to show up, and they're nested in our subconscious minds as to how we should show up for people and what that looks like. If we were all able to reframe this, our support systems would probably stay stronger longer. Rachel's grieving her lost identity. She needs support, but Monica and Phoebe are exhausted. They don't have the capacity to hold her grief and their own at the same time, so they get drunk and they escape. And when they escape and come back to reality, resentments can come back out again, and the old hurts and the things that have been festering beneath the surface of friendships. But I also want to remind you of something very profound that Phoebe says during all of this. She looks at Rachel and says, "You're just like Jack." And Rachel's thrown and goes, "Excuse me, what?" And Phoebe goes, "Jack with the magic beans." And Rachel said, "Yeah, but I don't have magic beans. I don't have a cow to trade. I don't." And Phoebe said, "No, you have magic beans. You just have to learn how to use them." And at the end of the episode, the credit card company calls back again to check on Rachel. And she tells whoever's on the other line with the credit card company that she's found her magic beans. And sometimes that's the greatest kind of support we can get, is when somebody helps us realize that through it all, we do have our own set of magic beans. Maybe the magic hasn't come out yet, but if we wait patiently enough, those beans will start to grow into something different. Sometimes we have to lose a lot to get there, but it's worth holding on to. That's kind of the adventure of life. So this is all disenfranchised grief that nobody talks about. The grief of being too much for your support system. The grief of losing the people that you thought would always be there for you. Even if they're still physically present, maybe they're just not showing up the way you still need. And the only escape is fantasy. In this case, it's George Stephanopoulos. In other cases, it's often other types of distractions. How has grief shown up for you? How is the support systems broken down? Or how have you tried to stay constant as a support for someone else? At The Naked Grief, we don't just talk about death. We identify other losses like job loss, career pivots, divorce breakups, empty nests, moving, identity shifts, friendships ending, the loss of the life you thought you'd have. Because it all counts and it all matters. And sometimes we get stuck while we're trying to grow. The Naked Grief offers support communities, different tools to work through, and a whole lot of other free resources that are out there without pressure, toxic positivity, or having to explain why it hurts. So when you're ready, check out The Naked Grief. Otherwise, come back next week for episode 5. Until then, have a great one. Da 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 da.